beautiful soul. Welcome to the Quantum Business Queen podcast. This podcast is a vortex for activating wealth, riches, and boss bitches. It is here that I teach multi-dimensional business. Our content will fall under 3 different categories: 5D quantum creation, 4D frequency alchemy, and the most potent 3D strategy. Every aspect of business that contributes to the creation of success is covered here. Plus, I will be personally interviewing the most amazing boss bitches that are at the forefront of the game, paving the way for money, magic, and magnetism in business. Let's get ready to activate all of that within you. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this transmission on grid work and what I would call divine knows. Now, this is really about being super intentional with your frequency and literally laying the energetic framework. That's what grid work is. It's laying the energetic framework for creation. So literally energetic grids, people talk about the Earth's grid, the energy that, goes through the planet. It's all gridded out. Energy of creation before it's manifested has a grid, a frequency. And so this is how you literally intentionally start gridding out your creations before you experience them on this physical plane. Now, New Earth Business, the Quantum Business Academy, is all about flipping business paradigms. So yes, I'm going to be talking to you and teaching you about how to create from this frequency standpoint, and it's going to go against what you have been taught. That's what flipping paradigms is all about. Full stop. I'm going to teach you things, and it might be massively counterintuitive to what you would normally think to do when it comes to creation. But this is all about creation from a frequency standpoint. This is how you create in the quantum. And, I'm going to show you how to unplug things from your grid, which means, yes, you might have to start saying no to particular clients if it's not a frequency match to your highest timeline. And I said to you, in the timeline activation, that when you have a conscious awareness, when your vision drops into your perception, into your conscious awareness, it is not your mind making things up. It is your mind accessing timelines. So how do we access these timelines and pull them into our physical experience? Well, it's actually you grid them out. And so, you could think of grids as literally an actual grid. So just visualize your experience now and your reality as a grid. And, what you put into your grid, this is your reality. And if we're going to use the analogy of your reality being an energetic grid, I want you to think about what you have plugged into the grid, into your frequency grid. Now, think about everything that you're plugging into your grid emits an energetic frequency. So let's say this part of your grid is your job. If you're working at a corporate job, what frequency is this part of your grid emitting out into the universe? So you think of the universe as a neutral energetic field, and all the universe does is pick up the frequencies in your grid, and it just says yes to everything. It picks up the frequencies in your grid and it says, okay, and it matches the frequencies in your grid, and it will show you those frequencies back into your experience. So the majority of people's grids is filled up with things that they don't love, like, their programmings, their distortions, their blocks, and through that they get a job because that's what they were taught to do through programming. And so, the majority of people's grids, for example, is filled up with what they're doing during the day, and what they're doing during the day most of the time is a job. So what is that pulsating? What frequency is that pulsating into the quantum field? And so, the other portion of what your grid might be filled up with is obligations, helping out family members, helping out friends. Obligation is a slave code. It's a distortion. So what other portion of your grid is filled up with those sorts of things? Maybe, hopefully, if you're lucky, you have some portion of your grid filled up with fun and play and laughter and connection. This is where we want the majority frequency to come from. But unfortunately, it's smaller portions of people's grids because of how they've been programmed, how they've been enslaved into creating a reality based on what the majority of the population says is acceptable, basically. And then, you have hopefully portions of your grid where you might plug in some self-love or plug in time with family, but you can see how, it's not the higher percentage of where the grid is basically what the plugins are. And then maybe you just have, ideally, just a bit of space. Not a lot of people leave space in their grid. Most of the people are programmed to think they have to fill it in. And what happens is when you fill in your grid with everything, I need to keep myself busy. I need to be doing. Where's the space for the newness? Where's the space for the newness? Where's the space for synchronicities? Where's the space for the unknown to come through? If we're working with frequency and we filled up our grid, we don't leave space for any of that. And so first thing you need to consider is your grid. And I literally I want this to be a real eye-opening exercise, because I want you to draw a grid and I want you to fill it in with everything that makes up your life. What percentage of your grid is your job? And how does that make you feel? And I'm not saying everybody hates their job. Maybe you love your job. That's freaking awesome if you do. And, high percentage of your grid is doing your job that you love. That's awesome. But I just want you to be real. And I don't want you to think that if you have a job that fills up your grid that is not high vibrational, that you need to go and quit it. Because trust me when I say scarcity is a very hard frequency to pull people out of. And it's a lower vibrational frequency. Scarcity is a lower vibrational frequency than being stuck in a place of not fully being happy. So what we want to do is keep you in a higher level timeline of not being fully happy, and then use that as a launching pad to get you into another place in another timeline, rather than have you dive into lower realms of scarcity. The scarcity is a lower realm timeline than being in a job that you don't fully love. So we'll keep you in the don't fully loving job space and let that be a launching pad into higher realms. So when I talk about grids and talk about, filling it with something you don't love, it's okay. This is the launching pad. I'm not saying for you to quit it now and just have a clean slate, because what happens is your mind will hook into scarcity and will be working from a lower platform than when you were. But this is a beautiful, beautiful eye-opening exercise, because what's going to happen is you're going to look at your grid now, where you first started this Quantum Business Academy journey, and look at your grid and where you end, and just notice the spaciousness in it. Notice what you create when you stop trying to fill up your grid. So maybe this is your job now, and let's say within this, you have family, you have friends, you have self-love, and then you just have space. This is where you allow divine creation to take over. This is where you allow all the miracles to happen. This is where you have new clients. So for example, I have clients I work with, and they're wanting to massively and drastically change their business, but their grid is too freaking full. How are you going to allow new clients to come in? How are you going to now allow new creations? Your grid has a capacity to hold a certain amount. And so this whole journey is literally about unplugging things from your grid, expanding your grid out so it can hold more, and plugging frequencies in that you actually want to experience, and then making space in your grid for newness. So your grid looks a bit more like this, where it's like I'm plugging things in that I love, and I am unplugging obligation. I'm unplugging the slave codes. I'm making my grid pure so newness can come in, and it's actually emitting frequencies of things that I want to experience. So my grid looks a bit more like this, or I freaking love my days. And I make space in my days, because who am I to say, literally as human beings, this is how we're programmed. So we don't guilt or shame us for thinking this, but who are we to think that if we truly believe in the quantum, we truly believe we have a soul, who are we to think as a physical being that we're the ones that create? You know, we're the ones that actually, our mind is the one that creates our reality. And if we fill up our grid, that's what we're saying to the universe. We're saying that it's our mind that creates and manufactures our experience. If we're filling up our grid, because we're filling up our grid through our mind, we're filling up our grid through doing, we're like needing to control how we experience our reality. We do not leave ourselves open for miracles, for synchronicities, for literally quantum leaping into new timelines, because we have limited our ability to experience because we're filling up our grid with things that are manufactured through the mind. And if we unplug the grid, we start flipping paradigms, we start making space and doing nothing and just honing in on our frequency, that's when we allow our soul to take over. That's when we allow newness to come through. So here's an example of how this is going to flip paradigms. So for me, when I made space when I literally energetically was gridding out this Quantum Business Academy, I stopped seeing all my clients, all my one-on-one clients. And people might think, okay, like from a plugged in 3D matrix perspective, well, Sarah, you're going to let go of heaps of money, you know, with all your one-on-one clients. And I said, no, because if I know that if I filled up my grid with one-on-one clients, I can't make space for newness. I can't make space for this. I can't make space for being a channel for all the beautiful souls that I am meant to serve through the Quantum Business Academy. So what I did is I said, I am done. I'm cleaning up my grid. I'm done seeing one-on-one clients. So I literally took all of the, you know, this aspect of my grid, the one-on-one clients, and I said, I'm done, because now it's time to grid out a new creation. I'm making space. I cleared all of this out. I made space for newness. And what happened was all of the one-on-one client income was literally replaced tenfold by new clients that came through the Quantum Business Academy, and my income went up. And this shifts the paradigm, because the realistic person who would look at this from the outside in would say, well, if you let go of all your clients, you're going to lose all your money. So why would you do that? But the quantum creator in me said, no, I'm making space in my grid for newness to come in, for myself to be a channel, for myself to serve even deeper than I was before. And I had my income probably tripled. I don't know the exact amount that it did, but it did, because I cleared my grid from an energetic standpoint and I made space. And I only created content in days like today where I just felt so freaking pumped and so divinely inspired that this was channeled straight through my heart space. All of what I'm teaching you guys comes from my heart space and is channeled directly from my heart space, because this is how I recode your frequency through you taking in all of this transmission. So I don't work from I need to do. I work from when am I in a position to channel through my heart space so I can recode you. And I make space in my grid, because if my grid was freaking full to the brim, that cuts you off from your channel. Like you have no space. It's all clogged up through frequency. So your frequency is your greatest currency when it comes to creating a new earth business. It is your greatest responsibility to look after your frequency and look after your energetic grid. And I don't know why I was making all those X's, but I'm using it as a representation. I want you to go in your grid now and see what you need to clear out. And it's literally not just, you're going to stop maybe hanging out with someone that contaminates your grid, or, you know, you're going to stop, you know, drinking on, you know, the weekends, because that contaminates your energetic grid and it fills it up, because then for the next 3 days, your grid is full of you trying to recover and it's emitting a frequency of super low vibes. Like, I want you to consider all of that and what you're literally plugging into your grid that's not serving your mission, that's not serving your divine creation. But I also want you to think about where you lack in boundaries, because obligation frequencies is plugging negative energy into your grid. So I'll never forget this story my mentor told me, and I want you to literally think about what these are. When I say what these are, I'm going to talk about what I call divine no. What is a divine no? And this divine no's are what will help you fill out your grid literally help you map out your grid with the experiences that you're calling into your reality. So, and look, the story I'm about to tell you, I think we've actually all been there. So hopefully this is super relatable to you guys. But my mentor said, before, she's fully now into 7 figures. And before then, they struggled financially big time, and I remember when I was at university, when I struggled financially as well, because I paid my own way, and I had 3 jobs, and it was one of those things where, you're at the ATM and you pray that there's money in there when you go to draw it out. But she said she never forgot that there was one time when she was at the supermarket and she knew she had about $160 in her account. So she very carefully counted all of the groceries that she put in her cart, and she calculated it in her head mentally. And, she was super aware of, making sure that she got the cheaper things so she wouldn't take her, over her limit. We interrupt this awesome podcast episode to tell you about my life-changing Quantum Business Academy. If you are ready to take your business to the next levels of abundance and freedom, then you're definitely going to want to hear more. Please don't take my word for it though. Here is one of our alumni sharing their experience.
My time in the QBA was incredibly expansive, very rich and rewarding, and I can't thank Sarah Tynan enough for her wonderful guidance, support and belief, and sometimes when I didn't have that belief in myself, and the wonderful people in the group. It was really life-changing and a very rewarding experience. So yeah, just expansive and big and bold and brave. It was wonderful.
If you want to know more, then please head over to my show notes, book a call with me, or you can message me in DMs. Now let's get back to the podcast. And so she remembers being at the checkout and, one by one, everything, was being scanned through, and she was watching as the till was adding up. And she felt anxiety building because she saw the number, she's thinking, oh my goodness, I don't think I calculated this properly, because the number is going above what she had in her mind. And she saw, all the lines of people behind her, and slowly as things were scanning through, anxiety was building and building and building. And all of a sudden the next thing scanned, and her max number hit, boom, $160. And then she saw the items that had still, had been yet to be scanned. And so she thought she had to stop the clerk from, the clerk went and scanned the next item, and she had to stop the clerk there and said, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I don't need these other groceries. I'm actually going to have to scan this one back through because, I don't actually need it. She didn't want to explain why, because it was humiliating for her. And, she watched as she felt the judgment from people that were in the line, and she was, really super embarrassed and, feeling so much anxiety. And, even the store clerk was judging her, okay, well, why would you get these items if you didn't want to buy them? And, she felt herself having to make something up as she tried to explain it. And it was a really, it ruined her day, that experience, because everyone in line was getting impatient. She felt the the energetic wrath of, just pouring onto her. And, she just turned bright red, and she just remembers finally, getting through that experience after the clerk had to, retally her total and all of that. And she got into the car and she was so humiliated. She felt devastated. She just was crying, and she grabbed onto the steering wheel and she said to herself, that will never happen again. She was unplugging that experience from her grid. That will never happen again. It was a divine no. It was like that energy, that testimony that she just, her stating that, it was like that frequency rippled out into the universe, and the universe felt it. It was like, right, we hear that, we feel that, that will never happen again. And from that day onwards, that was permanently unplugged from her grid. That was a divine no. So I want you to stop and think, what are your divine no's? What will never happen again? The boundaries, where you create your boundaries, whether it's with people or whether it's with yourself. This is how you are literally gridding your reality. Now, the lack of boundaries is a massive slave code. People stamping obligation onto you, and you allowing it to be stamped onto you is being stamped into your grid. What are you unplugging? What are your divine no's? What will never happen again? Maybe it's that for you. Maybe it's going to your bank account and feeling worried that there's not enough. Or maybe it's like not giving yourself choice, not having enough abundance, so you're not in choice. That will never happen again. You are a limitless sovereign being. You are meant to experience freedom. You are meant to experience choice. What do you declare today? I want you to pause this. I want you to spend an hour, however long, 2 hours on your divine no's. This is the work. This is where it's at. This is how you're going to grid out, the next year of us working together, so you can step into your highest timeline of creation, so you can make space in your grid. And then the things that are plugged into it are the things you bloody love, where it's like you are just relishing in this journey. You don't even care about the destination because you bloody love the journey. That's actually how we're meant to experience life. Make the goal about the journey. Make the goal about how you experience your grid. Don't make the goal about the destination, because you know what? There is no destination. Once you make the goal about experiencing your journey, there's no way you could fail. How about that? There's no way you could fail. Every single day, if you make the goal about what you plug into your grid and how you experience it, if that's the goal, what frequencies you emit out, how you can ascend, then there's no way you can fail. You've succeeded. Because you know what? Everything will be magnetized to you. You will be in such a beautiful place of detachment where you're just experiencing the deliciousness of life. And it all starts here with this work. So what are your divine no's? Pause now. Please do this work. Please do this work. Okay, beautiful souls. If you haven't gone deep enough into your divine no's, I just encourage you to please keep this paused and dive as deep as you possibly can into divine no's. This is what you stand for. This is the platform that you're, basing the foundations of your creations off of. This work is super important. And it's even more important to uphold your divine no's, because this is how you're going to literally start regridding your reality. So the other thing I want you to have a look at is I want you to literally draw a grid yourself. Okay, the next step in this work is drawing a grid yourself and making as many little squares in it as you need. And I just want you to do this from an awareness standpoint. Like, what have you actually plugged into your experience and your reality? How much space do you have in your grid? For you, if you're someone who sees clients, and maybe you have a job, maybe you work, and maybe you see clients on a one-on-one basis, maybe you don't, but you're wanting to create something new. If you have fully plugged too much into your grid, like, where's this creation have space to come in? I want you to really feel, where do you feel totally maxed out? Where do you feel obligated? Where have you plugged in too many divine no's? What does this look like? People are like, oh, why have I not experienced my manifestations? Why isn't this? And why? Well, it's because firstly, their grid's fully maxed out. They have no space for newness. They're at capacity. Too much of their frequency is plugged into lower realm energy. And too much of their frequency has been plugged into obligation and guilt. And this takes up the portion of their grid. Yes, they might have things where it's like, ooh, weekend, yay, happy grid. But look at the percentage compared to everything else that's pulsating out into the universe, and that's literally gridding your experience. And yes, you having to unplug from specific things that are not serving your creation might not make sense. Like for me, telling all of my one-on-one clients that I cannot see them because I'm gridding out. I didn't say this in these words because I'm gridding out, I'm making space and gridding out my new creation, the Quantum Business Academy. Trust me when I say, we're stepping into new realms of creation. We're stepping into frequency creation. When you make space, you watch how the results come in tenfold. But when you don't make space, the reason why you haven't made space is because you're in too much scarcity. You've detached from divine knowing. You've detached from your heart space creation, and you think in order to experience what you want to experience, you have to do. You've literally anchored into the mind, brain, the ego space of creation. You've maxed out your grid, and you could do yourself to death. Trust me when I say, if this is fully maxed out, you're not going to be living in the reality that you want to be living in. There's no space for newness. There's no space for you to experience the things that you want to experience. So I want you to just be super, super, super honest with yourself. Now, what is your grid full of? What do you need to unplug from? What are your divine knows? And just let there be space. Let there be space. This can be a hard one. But when you let there be space, you open up your divine channel. If there's no space, everything's too clogged up. You can't see the wood for the trees. If you want your vehicle to be shown to you, you have to make space. So here's what I would love your grids to look like. Yes, there are going to be a few X's in there because our world has contrast in it, and that's okay. That's okay. But I want it to be full of stuff that you freaking love. I want it to be full of stuff that just lights you up. And I want there to be space. Because this is how we create in the new earth. This is how we create from a place of expansiveness. This is how we create from a place of trusting and surrendering. Trusting and surrendering, when people say, that everything comes from being outside your comfort zone, or, all of the talk around being outside your comfort zone. When it comes to creation, when it comes to creating new earth business, your realm to receive, your realm to experience comes from trusting and surrendering, and trusting and surrendering is actually that part of you that's outside your comfort zone. Literally, trusting and surrendering expands your energy, expands your grid. When you don't trust and surrender and you go into a place of needing to do, and you're manufacturing things, you're thinking your mind is in control, your mind has to do, your mind is filling up your grid, watch as your grid starts to collapse. The second you trust and surrender, your grid literally starts to open up. Your grid starts to clean itself out, and you are in receivership mode. There's so much to be said with grid work. So my friends, I'm going to leave this with you. I'm going to let you have an awareness around what your grid looks like and what you want it to look like, what your divine knows are, and how you're going to start unplugging things that are not going to serve you experiencing this next level timeline for you. Whew. All right. I can't wait to hear how all this goes. So I'm going to leave this with you, and start doing your grid work. Thank you so much for listening today, beautiful soul. I hope you got so much gold and were activated in such a way that you could step into your highest timeline of abundance and freedom, because it is more than possible for you. If that desire has been planted in your soul, it is so deliberate. If you wouldn't mind, please rate, review, subscribe to this podcast so that we can get this message into the hearts and ears of more amazing light beings across the world. I would love to continue this conversation with you, so feel free to get in touch on Instagram at sarah.tynan.quantumcoach. If you're a Facebook person, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Sarah Tynan International. And please don't ever forget, if your desire is there, it's because your destiny is there too. You just have to remember who you are. Bye for now, beautiful.